On the USAID grant to the Global Shelter Cluster. I would like to start by asking Ella if you could please open the meeting on behalf of IFRC's Global Shelter Cluster Co-Lead Agency.
Okay, so just for now, I'm going to turn on my video and then turn it off afterwards to save some bandwidth for all our colleagues. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for making time to join our webinar. This is the first one of the two webinars. The other one is tomorrow to cover all time zones. So my name is Ella. I'm the Global Shelter Cluster Coordinator on behalf of IFRC. And I'm very happy that so many of you have joined the webinar. And I hope that we will be able to work together to advance on our joint objectives and strategy. So just a few words to put everything in perspective. For those of you who are not working with the Global Shelter Cluster on a daily basis, just I'd like to remind ourselves what the Global Shelter Cluster is and what our objectives are. So it's a network of humanitarian agencies and institutions who work and who are interested in advancing humanitarian shelter and settlements. We promote a coordinated shelter and settlements response to humanitarian crises, so both natural disasters and conflict situations. We try to build response and coordination capacity, and we provide coordination services at country level. So we have global, regional, and country level mandate, ambitions, and activities. So today we are here to discuss how we can advance on some of our objectives with the support of the grant that we have received from the US government. As you know, the US government is one of the largest donors to the humanitarian shelter and settlement sector. And we have been able to secure support, $2 million for the coming 2 years. So it started in October 2020, running all the way to September 2021, in support of our current strategy. Just to remind everyone what the current strategy of the Global Shelter Cluster is. So we have a 5-year strategy. We are at the moment entering the 4th year. So we have this year and next year to complete our 5-year strategy. It's based on 4 pillars that are coordination, advocacy, evidence-based response, and capacity building. And I'm happy to say that the grant that we will be discussing is supporting all these 4 pillars. So there's space for agencies to contribute across the board. Of course, as co-lead agencies, IFRC and UNHCR, we have our certain responsibilities, which we will be continuing and we will be improving with the support of the grant. But we also, of course, need the partner agencies to contribute along the lines of their expertise and interests so that we can achieve the results that we want to achieve, because it's not really possible for only the co-lead agencies to do all the work that we have set out for ourselves. So in the strategy document, if you have the time and chance to look at it, you will also see that there are agency goals and across the 3 levels that I had already mentioned. So this grant aims to support the initiatives owned by country, regional, and global processes and structures. And we would like to strengthen the response and coordination. I should mention that, of course, we're very heartened by the interest that you had shown, but our ambitions and our work, it's always more than the resources available. So we are going to put in place quite a rigorous, but hopefully a fair and transparent process in the partner selection. We very much would like to welcome your contribution and your interest to work together. but we will also be able to support a select number of initiatives. So I would like to ask for your understanding already for that, but I hope that by putting this process in place, we will also be able to select the initiatives that will be most useful, maybe for multiple objectives and at multiple levels. So with that, I'd like to hand over to discuss the details and how you can be part of this process, and we can work together in the coming 2 years. Thank you.
Thank you, Ella. I would like now to ask Miguel, please, if you could introduce yourself on behalf of UNHCR and what your role is.
Yes, hi, thank you, Pablo. Hi, everyone. My name is Miguel Urquía. I work with UNHCR for the Global Shelter Cluster as Deputy Global Shelter Cluster Coordinator. From the side of UNHCR, as co-lead of the Global Shelter Cluster, we would like to thank USAID, BHA for this support, which is very welcome to the Global Shelter Cluster. It's, of course, the funding is very welcome, and also the engagement and their opinion and their point of views on issues is really useful for us. I wanted also to thank IFRC for managing this grant on behalf of the cluster. I know that this is not an easy job because we did it for the last 3 grants, and it's very complex, and it's a thankless job in many ways. You get a lot of criticism, and it's very hard. So thanks IFRC for that, and we will of course provide as much support and collaboration as possible. I wanted to also follow up a little bit on what Ella mentioned about the reduced number, the reduced amount in the grant. It's a lot of money, but there are many activities in it. So we will have to indeed put in place or we have put a rigorous process in place, similar to the one that was done in the past, and in agreement with the Global Shelter Cluster Strategic Advisory Group. And we will have to really make tough decisions in selecting those that will implement those activities. These activities, some are global in nature, others will happen at the country level, but they will probably be managed globally as well. So this puts in place some issues on how the activities will be implemented. And these are considerations that will be taken by the committee, the independent committee that will be evaluating all the offers, as Pablo will explain now. So I hand over back to Pablo. Thank you.
Thanks, Miguel. Yes, I haven't introduced myself. My name is Pablo Medina. I'm the Deputy Global Shelter Cluster Coordinator on behalf of IFRC. So I am Miguel's counterpart in IFRC. And I'll be presenting to you briefly the key elements of this grant and what activities you can apply for, what are the selection criteria, and what is the process for application. But before I dive into that, I would like to ask Shirin, please, Shirin, if you could introduce yourself and what your role is.
Yes, sure. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Shirin, and I'm the Global Shelter Cluster Support Team on the IFRC side. And this year I will be supporting with the grant management. You can imagine it will be a quite administratively heavy process. So I will be dealing with the administrative and paperwork things. Thank you.
Thank you, Shirin. You will see that a lot of the communications will be coming from Shirin in the further management of this grant. Okay, so what does this grant include? When we talk, I forgot to explain that BHA means the Bureau of Humanitarian Assistance of USAID. They recently changed their name from OFDA, the Office of Foreign Development Assistance, to BHA, Bureau of Humanitarian Assistance. So BHA, USAID, we will be referring to them as the back donor. We have opened up 18 activities in total for project partner proposals, and we have gone for an open selection method. Obviously there are requirements for those activities, but whoever fulfill those requirements, the grant is open for any partner to apply, as opposed to going for a restricted method, which would have meant we pre-selected partners. The overall budget available through this grant is divided more or less in 3 chunks. One for Global Shelter Cluster partners, one for UNHCR, and one for IFRC as the co-lead agencies. They account more or less for about 1/3 of the grant for each of those partners, UNHCR and IFRC. For the total direct cost of the grant, excluding the grant management cost of $1.6 million US, if we include the grant management cost for the total direct cost, it's a little bit more. And then there is an indirect cost or admin cost of about $200,000 US. No partner can request in excess of 7% as admin cost. So the total grant of USAID to the Global Shelter Cluster amounts to $2 million, just short of 200 something US dollars to $2 million. So what we have opened for project proposals is the 2 elements there of partners direct cost and UNHCR direct cost, $630,000 US and $560,000 US, which is a total of $1,190,000 US. This is what we have opened. Obviously, as IFRC is receiving the grant directly on behalf of the Global Shelter Cluster, the IFRC share of the grant is for IFRC to implement, so that is not part of this call for proposals. Now, why do we put the UNHCR chunk out? Because UNHCR is going to do that through their standby partners. The funding is not going to go directly to UNHCR. The funding is going to go to standby partners of UNHCR. Miguel, could you just for a moment explain here what is a standby partner?
Yes, so standby partners are organizations that have signed an agreement, a particular agreement with the UN, not only with UNHCR, but and have an agreement to second people and services to UNHCR. Actually, we have a colleague from UNHCR here who knows much more about standby partners than me. If there are more concrete questions on standby partners, maybe I will ask her to respond to that. UNHCR has an agreement with the US government that the funds that it will receive from the US government will come from another body, not from BHA, but another body. So we cannot receive funds from BHA to UNHCR. That's why they go to the partners who will use this fund to second staff to UNHCR-led clusters and clusters. Yeah.
Thanks, Miguel. If you have any questions throughout the presentation, feel free to write them down, and there will be time at the end to ask, or you can also post them in the chat of this call. So now I'm going to go briefly through these 18 activities that we have opened up for project proposals. Some of them are focused on human resources, and others are related to capacity building, preparedness, etc. The first chunk of activities relates to search capacity for shelter coordination, preparedness and response. So this is staff, human resources that are dedicated to strengthen the technical support and search capacity of country-level shelter clusters. These positions, we have the first one, global focal point for housing, land and property. We are making available 2 positions and providing $65,000 US for each of those positions. Now, ideally, these positions will be in place for a period of 18 months. The grant lasts until the end of September 2022. So by the time this whole selection process is finished, probably the implementation period could start by April of this year. For these positions, ideally to last for the entire 18 months, and it's open for any partner with interest and capacity in housing, land and property to apply for this funding. Now, obviously, that might not be enough for an 18 months, so co-funding would be required for a full-time position. Of course, we prefer full dedication to the cluster, but we're also open to consider partial dedication to the cluster. I will go through the selection criteria later on, but obviously co-funding will have or receive more points than organizations that apply without co-funding. As you know, housing, land and property is a key issue in humanitarian shelter and settlements. There is a need for additional capacity in country-level clusters to address these HLP issues. And also, we realize that it's a key issue when we are talking about settlements. So we are opening up 2 positions, each of them to receive 65,000. Then we're also opening up that one is open to any partner to apply. This is not only this position can be hosted by any partner. Now the next 2, the senior roving cluster coordinators and the roving information management officers. These are key roles of the shelter cluster at the country level. The positions is two of them, two for each of them. We provide through USAID funding $90,000 for each of those positions. So these positions, however, can only be applied for by UN standby partners, because this is part of the budget that was allocated to UNHCR to fulfill its responsibilities as Global Shelter Cluster Co-Lead Agency. So again, the same applies. Full dedication is preferred. It will probably require some level of co-funding, obviously depending as well on the salary scales of the standby partner. But sorry, Miguel, since these are UNHCR positions, perhaps you want to say a bit more about them?
Thank you, Pablo. Maybe just to add that these roles are a continuation of roles that we had in the past when we had the ECHO grant. So some standby partners are already familiar with this role. Basically, these people would be deployed 50% of their time supporting newly activated clusters or covering gaps in existing clusters. And the time that they are not deployed, they will be working from home, providing remote support to country-level clusters. We are, of course, flexible on how this could happen, and what we would like to promote is that this becomes this expands over time as much as possible. So the co-funding from standby partners, we are happy to see how to maximize it. Thank you.
Thanks, Miguel. So yes. These 3 positions, or well, six positions, 2 of which you see in the screen, as Miguel just described, their main role is to provide this search capacity in newly established countries or when there is a need for search, or to provide ongoing support to existing clusters in country or remotely. That's the main role. The next chunk of activities revolve around localization, capacity building, preparedness, and outreach. We have 3 categories of activities here. The first one, capacity building, preparedness, and outreach, includes any activity that contributes to build the capacity of country-level shelter clusters or to enhance preparedness and outreach of the shelter cluster at the country level or at the global level. Now, because we want to make sure that funding is available for as many partners as possible, we have put a cap per initiative of 10,000. So no single proposal should exceed 10,000. This is basically to organize a country-level training on shelter and settlements, coordination or response, to organize a country-level preparedness workshop for shelter clusters at the country level or regional level, any activity that, as I said, provides or enhances the capacity of country-level clusters. And when I say clusters, I mean not just, I mean the entire network of organizations that participate in the cluster, or to build preparedness at the country level for those clusters. So, as I said, no single proposal should exceed $10,000. So we could at least fund four initiatives, trainings, workshops, etc. The next set of activities, same system. There is a cap per initiative of $15,000, but in this case is to promote localization within shelter coordination, shelter response within country level clusters, or global. It can be at the country, regional, or global level. Now, again, any initiative that promotes localization, it could be country level training for local organizations and local NGOs. It could be the activities that promote enhanced participation of local organizations in the cluster at the country level or global level. It could be translation of tools, guidance, materials of country level clusters, or arrangement of translation at meetings, etc. Anything that you consider can enhance and promote the localization agenda within shelter clusters and shelter cluster activities is permitted within this lump sum of 60,000. Again, a maximum of $15,000 per initiative. And the last activity is the development and updating of online trainings, because we have found that online trainings is a great tool to expand or increase the impact of our capacity building efforts. So this could be the development of new online trainings. It could be the updating of existing online trainings. It could be the translation of existing online trainings. Any initiative that includes the development of online and updating of online trainings is accepted here. There is no a cap in this case, so we could fund just one initiative, but obviously, again, the criteria will prioritize whenever there is co-funding, etc., so that we can try and spread the funding available as far as possible. The next set of activities relates to the result 2 in our grant in relation to analyze, learn, and improve from responses. The first activity here is a global focal point for research. Miguel, would you like to speak to this? And the next as well, the global focal point for advocacy.
Yes, well, in this role, it's similar to the other ones on staffing capacity. However, we don't envisage so much deployment. The role here would be more on, let's see, for the one on research is on linking with academia and linking with global shelter cluster partners to ensure that the priorities, the research priorities of academic partners are in line with those of the operational agencies and of the cluster, and facilitate more research in areas of interest to the cluster. The one on the global focal point for advocacy, it's also similarly, we don't envisage so much travel as the other ones, and the role here is for support on the advocacy efforts of the global cluster, actually advocacy for the sector rather, to ensure that the sector gets the attention that it deserves, that is well understood by decision makers and donors, etc. These two positions are also for 18 months, and we are hoping that they can be ideally full-time dedicated to this role. So the salary and the travel costs, but the travel in this case, we expect that it will be lower than in the other ones. we're expecting pretty senior positions in both cases because these are very complex roles, and we are expecting that they will do particularly the advocacy, well, both of them, senior roles that will deliver at quite high level and interactions at high level. Thank you.
Thanks, Miguel. So these two activities, 10 and 11, are open for UN standby partners to host, as they'll be seconded to UNHCR. Now, the next activity, activity 12, is to carry out country-level assessment, monitoring, and evaluation exercises or activities on behalf of the shelter cluster. There is lump sum available there for any organization interested in taking on this role to apply. Then there is the Global Shelter Cluster, the Global Shelter Coordination Workshop and Global Shelter Cluster Meeting. These are our annual events where we convene all partners. The activity here would be to host the 20,000 available to normally it's to support the travel expenses of participants that cannot afford to pay themselves. Now, obviously, given the current COVID situation, we don't know to what extent we will be able to do face-to-face meeting this year. So this will be evaluated and reassessed in the coming months. Then we have another lump sum of 40,000 to organize regional and country level shelter practice and lessons learned workshops of fora. Perhaps some of you have heard of the regional shelter fora. We have organized a few of those in Asia Pacific, MENA, Africa, and there was one in the Americas as well, one or two. And this is to support this regional exchange fora where shelter practitioners come together to share initiatives, projects, lessons learned. So this is available for any organization that is interested to organize and host. We are normally starting to do it with government in collaboration or cooperation with host governments. So for instance, last year it took place in Indonesia, hosted by the Indonesia Ministry of Social Affairs. And then this year, COVID allowing, it will be organized in Nepal. Any organization that is familiar with this regional shelter fora is most welcome to apply. You don't have to apply for all 40,000. We have also put a cap here of 10,000 per event. So the application is per event. The next activity is shelter projects. Some of you may be familiar with this flagship publication of the Global Shelter Cluster, which compiles case studies from various countries and shelter projects to learn, to share lessons learned, good practice, bad practice as well. And there is a lump sum there of 40,000 to support the publication of the next shelter projects edition. Now there is a working group within the cluster dealing with this. Most likely this funding would be channeled through that. Now there is another funding lump sum of $120,000 which is to support the activities and outputs of the Global Shelter Cluster working groups, communities of practice, the strategic advisory group, and the donor consultation group. So this is to distribute amongst all of these bodies of the Global Shelter Cluster. Obviously, I imagine it would be the agencies chairing those working groups that would normally send applications or project proposals to access some of this funding. We'll have to distribute it about amongst the several working groups that exist. So just to mention a few, there is the Promoting Safer Building or Safe Recovery Working Group. There is the Construction Standards Working Group, the Disability Working Group, There are a few others, the Vulnerability Classification Working Group, and then there is the activities of the Communities of Practice and the Strategic Advisory Group. All of them are welcome to apply for funding to advance or complete their outputs, which all fall within the Global Shelter Cluster strategy. And the last two is simply to host the funding available, a limited amount of funding available to continue to improve and develop the Global Shelter Cluster website, which is known as one of the best cluster websites out there, and basically a key vehicle for communication, information sharing. So there's some funding there for the website development, maintenance, and translation as well. We want to continue to increase the resources available in different languages. And also we have launched an app last year, and we want to continue to improve this app. So there is some funding available there for an organization to host these activities. This covers all 18 activities in those different blocks. The selection criteria, you will find them in the two documents that I will mention later on. But for the human resource related activities, the selection criteria you have in there, we will be giving points depending on the degree to which the applicant organization fulfills those criteria. So if the organization has carried out the activity in the past, has contributed to that activity in the past, for continuity reasons and for the experience that they already have, if we have more points, if the organization provides co-funding for the activity, if the organization can ensure the maximum time dedication to the cluster, will have more points than if an organization is making someone available only 50%. So if the organization commits to continue the activity for at least a period of 6 months beyond the life of the grant, that will get more points. I think we have, the co-funding is if they have provided co-funding in the past and whether they commit to provide co-funding for this activity now as well. There's also some points to make sure that the global focal point can deploy to any country. Some organizations have constraints in their mandate in terms of to which countries or in their priorities to which countries they can deploy. Obviously, we'll give more points to organizations that provide a human resource that can deploy to any country. And then for the design and relevance of the proposal. Now, for the other activities, the selection criteria are similar. Whether the organization has carried out a similar activity in the past, whether it has the technical capacity and expertise required for that activity. There is co-funding, but we remove the co-funding element for the localization initiatives just to encourage applications from local organizations. And then whether the organization can undertake this activity in any country. Obviously, that only applies for those activities that require geo-coverage at the country level. There are other activities that this criteria wouldn't make sense. What is the timeline? We launched the call for expressions of interest officially yesterday through this Global Shelter Cluster newsletter or alert. The webinars that we are conducting today and tomorrow, for your information, the webinar tomorrow is exactly the same information. The only reason why there are two is because to accommodate the different time zones. So there is no need for you to call to the webinar tomorrow. In any case, we are recording both webinars and we will post them in the dedicated page in the Shelter Cluster website for the USAID grant, so that if there are questions that perhaps don't come out today and come out tomorrow, you can also listen to the webinar tomorrow. And we will also open up a period. You can send your questions in writing as well, and we will share the answers to all those questions with everyone through that website, the page in the website for this grant. Now, the deadline for receiving project proposals is the 22nd of February. And then there is selection committee composed of members of the Global Shelter Cluster Strategic Advisory Group, but also because IFRC has its own procedure, we have to have a representative of IFRC Finance Department, somebody else from IFRC outside the shelter unit. We will be evaluating the proposal. Sorry?
Okay, merci.
Shirin, if you can mute Roger. There you go. Thanks, Roger. Roger. Then we will be reviewing the proposals from February 22 to 26. For those proposals that are selected, the partners selected will have to go through a due diligence process that we have. We call it financial management risk assessment, where you have to send a number of documents. Basically, it's a due diligence process for partners that are selected to implement the different initiatives. And hopefully, if everything goes smoothly, we will be signing project agreements for the funding by March 15, at the latest March 31st, so that activities can start as of April 1. How to apply? You will have to fill in the column K of the list of activities Excel table. You all, because you have called into the webinar, have received the Global Shelter Cluster update with the call for proposals, and where we have links to this list of activities in the Excel table, but I'll show it to you in a minute. And you will also have to fill in the project proposal template where you describe your proposal. So there are two documents that you have to submit. I'll show them to you in a minute. You have to send these documents to the email address by the close of business, the 22nd of February. If you have any questions that are not that occur to you after the webinar, you can send them in writing to the email address as well before the 15th of February. We will try to respond those questions within 2 days maximum, and we will share those answers with all, because perhaps they are also useful for others who are planning to apply. This is a brief description of the due diligence process for those partners that are selected. You'll have to just send us a number of documents showing your organizational structure, your financial management capacity. It shows also the track record with IFRC or other donors, and other elements in considering you as a partner that can fulfill the criteria of reporting that the IFRC and the back donor require. That ends the presentation, but I want to quickly show you those two documents that you will have to submit. Let me share with you the Excel table with a list of activities. It might not be big enough for you to see, but basically this is the document where you have each of those activities that I have gone through in the PowerPoint presentation. You have them listed there in these lines. This is one focal point for HLP. So here you would have the selection criteria for that activity, and you have to, if you are applying, say, to host the global focal point for HLP, you have to fill in the gray area here, explaining how do you meet those criteria. Now, obviously, we have, for instance, maximum 30 words, so here it will have to be a very summarized version of this. In the project proposal template, you can expand a little more if you want to expand more against the criteria. So for each of the activities that you will be applying for, you will have to fill this gray area. Now, obviously, if you are applying to several activities, you don't have to send us one of these files per activity. You can use the same form for those activities that you are applying for, but you leave blank those that you are not submitting an application for. So obviously just complete those activities that you are interested in applying for. So if you are interested in hosting a global focal point for HLP here, and you also have a preparedness initiative that you would like to submit, you fill this one as well, etc. This is one of the documents. And then the other document would be the project proposal template itself, which you also have a link to in the call for project proposals. It's a simple document. We don't want you we don't want this to be extremely complicated, but it just includes the key information about the project or initiative that you are requesting funding for. If you have any questions on this template, please don't hesitate to ask after you go through it. Here you explain the rationale for your proposals for the activity you're asking funding for. Here you just really just use the goal and the outcomes that we give you, because those are the goal and outcomes of the back donor proposal that has been approved by USAID. Basically, what you need to include here with your own words is the outputs of your proposal that will contribute to these outcomes. Now, that list of activities that I showed you earlier is classified by outcome. There are 2 outcomes in the USAID proposal. So the outputs of your activity will contribute to outcome 1 or outcome 2, depending on where the activity you are seeking funding for falls within the grant. Here you detail the activities. If it's 18 months, you can change the table. You can also put it as an annex if this is too small for you. We are flexible. And here a little bit of how you will monitor and evaluate the project, etc. You can submit your budget in your own template, but just make sure that you don't include any admin cost in excess of 7%. Ideally, you will not include admin costs, because then there will be more money available for direct implementation, but obviously we understand that some of you cannot avoid that. So that's the template for the proposal. Again, if you are submitting funding request for more than one activity, it's your choice whether to send this template, a separate template per activity, or if you choose to send one template which includes all the activities you're seeking funding for, just make sure that you have a separate budget for each of those activities, and that you clearly show separately for those activities how do you meet the criteria, etc. Because we are going to have to be able to compare your proposal with other proposals, and if you put them all in one and don't separate clearly within that one document, it might be difficult to compare. I think I will leave it here. I think there are a few questions that are coming in through the chat, and maybe I'll try to address those, but feel free to keep throwing questions. Miguel, do you want to address the question on whether partners are expected to propose candidates for the HR position?
Yes, so actually we would welcome that partners propose candidates, but this is not expected. They don't need to do it. The recruitment will be done later once that the partner has been selected. We would like to participate in the recruitment as well and have a say in the persons that are recruited. Over.
Okay. There is also another question about assessments. I think, Miguel, correct me if I'm wrong, but the main goal of this question is to ensure an evidence-based shelter cluster strategy, an evidence-based design of a shelter cluster strategy, but also monitoring and revision of the shelter cluster strategies. So it's to ensure that whenever we develop HRP, a humanitarian response plan, or a flash appeal, depending on whether it's at an onset or the protracted crisis, that these strategies, the shelter cluster strategies, are based on evidence, and therefore this is for organizing and implementing together with country-level clusters, cluster-wide assessment, cluster-wide monitoring, cluster-wide evaluation of the response. The question of whether it's to investigate fire safety across several countries, this doesn't fall within the scope of this activity. That would be something more related to research, and I don't know, I would have to understand better, but that's not included in the scope of this activity. This activity typically, I mean, it has been done in the past by the REACH initiative. We are not necessarily saying it's targeted for one organization only, intended for one organization. Country-level clusters could apply for this, so an agency on behalf of a country-level cluster could apply for this. We're also looking for economies of scale, of course, and if there is one organization that is better placed to conduct these assessments on behalf of the cluster in coordination with the cluster and cooperation with the cluster, then we can also consider the whole amount to go to one organization. So it will depend on what we receive. But I hope it's clearer now, the scope of the country-level assessment and monitoring. Focusing on the shelter cluster strategy, design and monitoring of the response. I can't quite see, yes, I can go now to because I'm not sharing the presentation anymore. So I don't know if there are more questions in the chat. Are there any other questions from anyone in the call? Okay, the co-funding. Let me see. The co-funding requirement. Okay, the co-funding is not a requirement as such. It's simply that proposals that come with co-funding, one of the criteria for selecting proposals is that there is a co-funding. This is because we want to promote joint ownership of the role of the different activities, but also because the co-funding allows to spread the available funding further. So it is not that it is a requirement. If you can submit an activity or an initiative without co-funding, however, you will receive less points when that criteria is assessed if the organization is not contributing co-funding. Now, when we say co-funding, it doesn't necessarily have to be like HR time. The time of personnel can count. You can value that co-funding or give a value justified, of course, for that co-funding. So, you know, time spent by staff of your organization in that particular activity can be given a value, a monetary value, can be monetized in terms of co-funding. There is, yes, the activities. The activities have to be completed by September of 2022. Well, at least the funding need to be used by September 22. Obviously, I mean, some activities are ongoing. They don't stop after the funding of USAID or the time frame of this grant has ended, such as the Global Shelter Cluster website will continue beyond September 22, but the funding need to be used up by the end of September 2022. Now, let me go back. Miguel, you had a comment on the example that was presented earlier on the fire safety issue.
Yes, well, I was thinking that perhaps that issue could come under the working group, the funding for working group, because maybe some of the working groups may think that these fire studies may be useful. So perhaps it could go under the activities of those working groups, provided that the working group requests the funding for that activity. So it's for the working group leads to request the funding for that particular activity. And then I see that there is also a question on the UNHCR positions. It says the funding indicated is only for their salary. Is co-funding required for the travel deployment costs? Yeah, actually, here we will have to see. Let's say we will try as much as possible that the the travel and deployment costs are covered by the requesting country. Country office. or cluster rather, by the UNHCR. Let's say if they are deployed to Yemen, by UNHCR Yemen. Or perhaps if there are cases where standby partner maybe has the funding to cover the travel for that particular country, that would be very welcome. Or maybe we can find ways to maximize, from one side or the other. So this is a bit open. In principle, we think that we should be able to cover it from country level clusters, but that can be a part of a discussion. Hope this clarifies, maybe not that much, but it would be good perhaps to include a little bit for travel, just in case, but in principle, most of the travel will be covered by country level clusters. Over.
Yeah, thanks, Miguel. I'm just scanning through the chat here, seeing if there are any questions that I have missed. There was a hand up, but now I think it's down. So yeah, okay. I know maybe we have gone a little bit quick over all of this, and there's a lot of information to digest. As I mentioned earlier, you can post questions through the email address proposals@sheltercluster.org before the 15th of February. We'll be answering those questions. Do feel free to reach out with any questions you have if you haven't understood, or if you are planning to apply in the process of application, you have some questions, please do reach out. And best of luck for those who are willing to work with us in the implementation of this grant. I don't see any further questions on the chat, or feel free to speak as well. No? Okay, so thank you very much for your participation. I will close it. Yes, Miguel?
Apologies. I realized that I made a mistake when I explained about the UNHCR standby partners. Just to clarify, we are talking about UNHCR standby partners. The UN standby partners are a bigger group of people, of organizations. So within those UN standby partners, a subset have signed agreements with UNHCR, and it's to that subset, those who have an agreement with UNHCR for standby partners, not the broader UN partners. Apologies that I didn't clarify that before.
Okay, thanks, Miguel. Obviously, those partners will know who they are. This applies to the senior roving cluster coordinators, the information manager, and the advocacy and research focal points. Thank you very much for your time. Shirin just posted there the email where you can post your questions. We will also keep an eye on the website. We will also put in the website, Shirin, if you can post in the chat here the link to the website page for the USAID grant. We will be uploading this presentation there as well so you can review. And best of luck with the process. We look forward to hearing from you. And just remember that this doesn't mean the USAID grant is not the only vehicle through which you can participate and work in the Global Shelter Cluster. If you have initiatives and ideas that you want to advance and they fall within the Global Shelter Cluster strategy, whether they can or cannot be funded through the USAID grant, there are many other vehicles available, working groups. You can also propose the creation of a working group. So don't think of the USAID grant and this funding as the only way through which you can contribute and participate in the Global Shelter Cluster. This is just one way that we are making available, but obviously our activities encompass far wider than the funding available for this grant, and we have been working through this way for many years. So don't feel discouraged if your initiative is not selected for funding. Obviously, you have been working with the Global Shelter Cluster before the USAID grant, and hopefully you will continue to be working with the Shelter Cluster after the USAID grant. So with or without funding, let's keep working together to advance humanitarian shelter and settlements. Thank you very much. Look forward to hearing from you. Have a nice evening.
Roger, the meeting is over, but maybe you had a question. Did you want to ask something?
Yes, I have one question only because I came later. Me, I'm from Congo, Kinshasa. My organization is HALDI. I would like to know if this presentation will be shared with the participants.
Yes, the presentation will be shared. It will be maybe in the chat. You have seen the link to the website. It will be recorded. So this has been recorded, and the presentation will be shared in this website that has been shared in the chat. It's basically in the sheltercluster.org website. There is a page dedicated to the USAID BHA grant.
Yes.
You have the link there. Shirin posted it just before when you share your email address. Just before that,
yes,
there is
that is my email address. aldikinshasa.com gmail.com. That is my
So we will not be sending by email. I don't think it will be it will be posted on the website that you have. Shirin has just shared it again. It's this website. If you go to the chat, you can see the website and you can click there, and that's where the presentation will be shared. And you have all the information of the project and all the forms that need to be submitted. They are there.
Yes. Thank you so much.
Roger, you could also talk with, I'm sure you are in touch with Caroline de Bast and the cluster coordinator in Kinshasa.
Yes.
You may want to discuss with her.
My organization is also the member for course in the cluster, in national cluster.
I know, yes.
Yes.